CEO of EQIFi. Thank you for coming. We wanted to have some people around, get together, make new friends, and talk about interesting stuff. I love Bitcoin, as you can see, and I love Bitcoin 2022, but they were very restrictive in the content that could be associated with the event. So we decided to do some small side event and bring friends together. And without further ado, this is my good friend Pablo. We are the first bank in the metaverse. We announced the first branch, functional branch, not JP Morgan kind of branch, and issued the first NFT debit card. So this card, that's a physical card, is also an NFT card. You can use either or. It works in the metaverse as well as the real world. But Pablo is doing so much more interesting stuff. That's why I really wanted to have him, and has been a thought leader in the NFT space. So Pablo, please.
Thank you very much, Brad.
A little insight on what's going on and what you're doing and what we should look forward to.
Thank you, Brad. Thank you for the invitation. It's always a pleasure to see you, and congratulations for everything that's happening on EQIFi. It's wonderful to see. Now, I'll start, if you want, just by doing a very simple explanation of what in my opinion, is an NFT. I know that not right now it's a big buzzword that's going around everywhere, but I like to always simplify it, for the people. So I like to always simplify it when I bring it to people that are really interested in the space and don't really know the technicalities behind. To make it super easy, NFTs are really a certificate of provenance, history, and ownership. It's really just a better way to transact with any digital item, and it just offers interoperability between not only the digital domain, but also between the physical and the digital domain. So it's very simple. It's just an innovation really in the certificate of authenticity that you would have associated to other assets. Now, in the same way that in the internet, when it started many years ago, we could not have foreseen the evolution that we have seen, where the appearance of social media, of e-commerce, of many of the things. I think with NFTs, we're in the same stage where right now, it's the inning number one, and we're going to see a lot of sophistication moving forward in the space. Now, I don't want to bore you with my story of how I came to be, but I always like to tie the state of the industry with a little bit of my story and why I decided to do some things, so that people can realize a little bit of where we are and where I personally think that we're going. I was lucky enough, I've been embedded now in the blockchain space for many years, and I was lucky enough that I found about the NFT concept very, very early, right at the beginning of when this was actually coming out. It was with a Metaverse project, with a project called Decentraland. And I understood the blockchain components very well, but it was always something novel. And as a side thing, as a hobby, I started participating and seeing what's happening there, because I realized that when people understood how powerful it is to have your own ownership of these digital domains, it would clearly get some more attention. Fast forward a few years later, I kept on seeing the interest in the space. I kept on purchasing quite the amount of land, where at some point I was the largest owner globally of the metaverse across the different projects of the land in the metaverse. And I was lucky enough to find out about the art component as well. Same technology applied, and the same method, the same thinking process behind, the same thesis. I started with control aggressive behavior to start really speaking with all the artists, all the marketplaces, all the collectors, everybody really embedded in the ecosystem, and start being very active. Now, it was a beautiful journey. Back in the day, it was just a few of us. It was me and two other people really, with a little bit of more intensity, more capital, and more going into space. And we really helped in, setting up the infrastructure to really, for this to really start expanding. And this leads me to one of the comments that I have, is that right now we have a lot of interest in the space. We have a lot of engagement, we have a lot of activity, and I mean this with absolute no disrespect, but there's a little bit of unsophisticated and uneducated interest in the space. We're seeing a lot of volatility in the prices. We're seeing the treatment of NFTs as financial assets. We're seeing the treatment of NFTs as commodities, and I think that we need to further, in general, our understanding of the space to really expand and become mainstream. Again, very exciting times. It's an explosion of talent and innovation, an explosion of people joining the space, but some infrastructure that is needed to come forward. So again, during this beautiful journey, again, we're in inning number one of the NFT ecosystem. I realized that there were three just general issues that were maybe stopping things from going to where they needed to go. I think that the ecosystem is going to move towards that direction, and we're going to see a second wave of the right institutions, the right players giving those services to really provide an infrastructure layer that is needed for the ecosystem. Number one is the user experience, where if you're not blockchain technical, it's very complicated to search, to participate, to be part of the ecosystem. This is something where the infrastructure is not moving as fast as the innovation that is happening in the space. Again, if you're not blockchain technical, it's very, very difficult to participate. This needs to be something that's going to improve. It's improving over time, but needs to keep on improving. We have another issue with the quality and control, with the curation in some aspects, NFTs. We're very good about putting works in the blockchain, but we have to be better at giving the support that is necessary for creative careers and creative projects and for longevity of these projects. And the third problem that we have is the environmental concerns, which is not really the problem of either collectors nor creators, but I think we have a duty to work with other alternatives to get to the same places without some of the drawbacks that we have with this. So again, I am embedded now in bringing some infrastructure into the space. I do think that in order to bring people, we need to make it super easy. Any consumer-facing application in the past has done so. We need to create these bridges to bring in the traditional people. I expect at this moment 95% of the activity is really being done by 5 to 10% of the wallets of the participants in the ecosystem. And we need to really open up the doors for everybody to be able to come in. So we are personally concentrated in our entities in making that experience super easy. So we price things so everything happens on chain to have all the benefits of the NFTs, but we price things in US dollars, and we give the people the ability to interact with credit card, debit card, ACH, wire, and crypto in different chains. We automatically purchase carbon credits with every transaction that happens in the platform to offset twice the amount of the emissions that we put out. And in general, we just make the experience super easy, point and click, like if it was e-commerce, by utilizing blockchain technology in the background. In my humble opinion, this is in general where the NFT ecosystem as a whole is going. Active participation from everybody, while at the same time having all the benefits from decentralization. And this is a little bit of where I see the ecosystem. I think that right now, I don't want to sound a little bit negative, but again, we're seeing a lot of interest. This reminds me a little bit of what happened in the ICO ecosystem a few years ago. I see a lot of volatility. I see a lot of projects getting some valuations that are a little bit unjustifiable, and I do expect this volatility to mature, and those projects that are just copycats and not adding anything to start going down, and those projects that are thinking long term to really take off and grow exponentially. I think that, for example, EQIFi was started to be built around the time of a lot of activity in the previous cycle of the overall. And I think that, projects like EQIFi that are able to come into this NFT ecosystem and build with good infrastructure and long-term vision and understanding the complexities of this and making it easy for all the customers, I think it's the way to move forward in this ecosystem. So that's what I'm concentrating on myself. Again, to build the technology for more and more people to come in. I think we have seen this in the art space in particular with Nifty Gateway. That has clearly been the driver of the ecosystem since the beginning, and it's just as easy because you can create an account in less than half a minute, participate, and be part of the ecosystem. I think that that's the goal ultimately, and I'm just looking forward to that. So that's a little bit of the state of the ecosystem of how I see it. And then I'll comment on the three buckets of where I see creation of value on the space and where I'm concentrated, and then maybe we can perhaps open up to some questions. But I think there's three buckets. If you want to invest and take a position in the space, you can purchase assets. You can purchase assets, you can look at the different asset classes within the ecosystem and either purchase art or purchase land or purchase collectibles or purchase game assets. That is, it's time consuming, but I think it's very rewarding. Those very historical assets of right now, I think, are going to appreciate a lot in value. It's a little bit not scalable, but it's certainly very rewarding. You can also invest in the tokens associated to many of these projects. Particularly, many of these projects are coming out with governance tokens. On the famous DAOs, I personally have my reservations. I don't like to speak negatively, and I've certainly been wrong a lot more times in my life than I've been right. But I do think that DAOs have cracked the technology so that now everybody can participate in the governance, but they have not yet cracked the incentive system to make people participate and to incentivize people to have a lot of activity in the DAO. So I personally, I am not the most bullish on DAOs. I have a few personally a few activities in DAOs, but very, very conscious, and I'm seeing how this develop long term. And then the third obvious one that I think is very available to everybody, and where I think really it's the big opportunities on the infrastructure around, on the service providers, on all the marketplaces and all the service providers that are servicing the industry and taking fees along the way. So that's a little bit of the three buckets that I see, and I'm focused, I guess, on the first one and the third one. And then yeah, that's pretty much where we stand in the ecosystem, and I'm happy to answer some questions in particular about anything that might be around. Yeah. Yes.
What projects are you, other than yours, of course, what projects are you most excited about right now that we may not know about? Just because we don't have the insight you have into what's up and coming.
Okay, yes. So I think there's a few groups now that are coming together and doing very good things. I like, obviously, what Yuga Labs with Bored Apes and the Punks are doing on that side. I think it's a good path. I actually not only missed it, but dismissed collectibles and PFPs at the beginning. It was, again, a mistake. I've been wrong a lot more times than right, but they have really shown that you can build a community through this ecosystem, and that's very powerful. I think that they're really putting a path for a lot of projects, so I really like what they're doing. I'm a big fan of what Nifty Gateway does. Again, what I mentioned, I think that putting all that infrastructure and making it easy for the consumer to participate is very important. And I think they were the big driver of the beginning, and they will continue to be very relevant, at least in the art ecosystem. I like what Sandbox has been able to achieve is absolutely extraordinary. It is just in general, anything that Animoca is involved, they're very thoughtful. The way that they're building and scaling, it's something I haven't seen, outside of this in the past, and I think it's a very exciting project that is bringing together a lot of groups from around the world, very serious groups, and I'm very bullish on Animoca in general and Sandbox in particular. And as it relates to art, well, I very much like in the PFP ecosystem as well, what RFTK and CloneX is doing. I think it's like the corporate approach to the PFP space. It's Nike behind, so it's the merger of RFTK and Nike. And again, I like that big project approach to the space. I think that's the next wave and what people are really seeking. I really think that the clones are going to really be very important, and together with the apes are going to be leading the ecosystem. And then I like what there's an Asian company that is called TR Labs that is doing some very interesting things on the art side of the ecosystem. Well, there's a lot of interesting smaller projects that are coming around, but yeah, I think that's probably the ones that I would concentrate on. Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. You're welcome.
Maybe I kind of missed it, but what is your project, right? I heard early, you're the biggest landholder of the metaverse, but did I miss it? Is I the only one?
Yeah, sorry, so I don't want to make this about a pitch about. I don't want to.
He was like, other than yours, and I was like,
Yeah.
well, what is yours?
Please.
Yeah. All right.
Come on.
Context helps.
Yeah.
If we understand more about you, we understand more about what you're saying.
Of course. Again, I don't want to bore you with my story, but yeah. So again, I was very active with the collection. Where it's very, very significant. We're very active, and I was having not only problems myself with this collecting because everything was very fragmented. It wasn't very clear. There wasn't many longevity to many of the projects, and I was having conversations with a lot of tier 1 artists from the traditional world, as well as big-time collectors from there, that they wanted to participate, but that they just didn't know where to go, and it wasn't easy for them. So I set out again to create a cultural institution and I didn't want to fight against the establishment. So I think that the best way is to get the knowledge and know-how and the experience from the traditional world. So we hired some of the most knowledgeable, influential, and amazing people from the traditional art world to be the curators, to lead all the artistic component of Aorist. My project is called Aorist. And then we also merged it with what we think is the most sophisticated platform out there. We spent a very significant amount of money as well as a long time in developing this platform that is super easy to use. It's point and click, super easy, all payment methods, pricing US dollars, etc., etc. Again, our thesis and our vision is to appear at the global stage with the top creators in the biggest project that they have done so far, and we both support the project and their career long term. So we did the Refika Nadol exhibition here in Miami Art Week last December. I think that a lot of people probably saw that. We're now going to Venice. We're going to have an incredible exhibition with Studio Drift that I think is going to blow. It's going to take away steal the show. We're going to be later in the year in Art Basel as well with incredible projects, but really focused on that conversation between the digital and the physical, making it super easy. Through the process, we realized that the platform was so sophisticated that it was the most sophisticated platform for minting and distribution in any layer 1 protocol, that we decided to white label and license the technology. So we're now, we created a team and we're now working with a few clients already to put pretty much a very similar infrastructure with their design, with their content, with their schedule, and that is working, and that is working well. And then with the collection, I'm still very, very active. So I do this for legacy and for passion and for legacy, not for monetary terms. So I'm very active in not only acquiring things for the collection, but supporting artists in their careers alongside. So yeah, that's a little bit of the context.
Spell it for me one time. AOIST.
So Alpha, Oscar, Romeo, India, Sierra, Tango.
I have a question.
Yes.
When looking at projects, I know a lot of people are creating communities.
Yes.
And I've seen what Gary Vee is doing, and also World of Women, and there's a ton of them going on. What necessarily would you recommend when looking at a project? How do you know something's going to have longevity versus short term?
Well, that's a very good question that I'm not sure I have an answer to. The reality is that community is the name of the game, right? Like we have seen that culture, that everybody likes culture, and that just maybe before it was just not maybe as approachable as before. So before you used to go to a gallery, you used to go to a auction house, you used to go to any place, and we look at you like this, and it's just not approachable. I think that now we have seen that when people can participate easily through their browser, everybody wants to participate, and we're super welcome. So community is super important, and this technology allows you to build that community around by giving them utility through these NFTs. Again, PFPs, collectible projects, are perhaps a little bit outside of my domain, so I don't know. I cannot give an actual a perfect answer for that. But I think that there's a lot of people are really excited with what's happening here. And if you put the right roadmap, if you give them the right milestones, if you give them the right utility with your NFTs, and you're consistent, you can really build a community. I think that was the key of what Bored Apes did. I mean, this is 1 year that this happened. It's incredible what they have been able to accomplish. And it's just, against the building that community. For those collectible projects, no community, no project. And the best way right now, I think, is through Discord and through Twitter and through activities, but we'll see how that develops. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Pablo.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm a guy he found on the street or at a Bitcoin conference. I was
purple
walking.
Shirt. I'm like, come on.
My name is Josh Lawler. I'm a partner at the firm Zuber Lawler. We're about a 50 attorney firm in the United States. We've got 7 offices. LA is the main office, which is where I am. We're also in New York, Chicago, Silicon Valley, Denver, Austin, and Phoenix. We handle complex transactions, complex litigation, a lot of very specialized niche areas where we have a very distinct advantage. One of those is distributed ledger technology and digital assets. And as you'll hear in a second, I'm using the broad terms very much on purpose because that's much wider than cryptocurrency or NFT or DAOs, all of which are kind of included amongst. Historically speaking, I can trace my involvement in the space to 2011-ish, when I said the 2 stupidest words of my entire life, actually to a guy whose hand I just shook earlier today, to Brock Pierce and to Bill Quigley. Those 2 words were tulip bulbs. That was 2011 when Bitcoin was, I think, certainly less than 5 cents a token. And they're now billionaires, and I'm sitting here having this discussion. And that's how that went. But I've been fortunate that I've been in Southern California surrounded by people. So in 2017, when ICO mania hit, and suddenly it was front and center securities laws, and I've been a securities attorney for 27 years, I took notice and started doing a couple things. First, I looked around at the legal framework, what was going on, and promptly decided a lot of people were going to go to jail. So I did not bring our firm into it at the beginning of 2017. The other thing I figured out was a lot of people were making a lot of money. So I started trading, and I'm not a natural trader. I'm certainly not a technology guy, so it was an evolution. I had to read a lot. I got my Ledger Nano S, I got verified on Kraken, and I started reading. And a funny thing happened, which is that I just really took to this stuff. And when I say that, I mean really primarily, first and foremost, the technology, the architecture, the structures, the use cases, the value propositions in business, and I also understood the regulatory. And that's been a very big differentiating factor compared to a lot of other legal out there, shameless plug. We really understand the space, I think, a lot better and then figure out how to work that into what is a very antiquated legal framework. More on that later. So that's who I am, and I'll shout out to Sarah Fernandez in the back there, who's one of our spectacular associates who's now had several years of trading in this space also and has done some amazing things in terms of figuring out how to legally transfer digital assets that otherwise are relatively hard to verify, like, say, privacy tokens, as you can imagine. So that's who I am. Now, you guys are all familiar with Salvador Dali, right? You guys know the melting clocks painting? Okay. We're living in it right now. You know, one of the first things to recognize about what's going on is that these assets, which are little bits of code, can be more than one thing at a time. And the fact that they can be more than one thing at a time is cause of much regulatory confusion and difficulty, and also a lot of opportunity out there. So just to throw out the basic ground rule examples, your typical token that you see on, you know, Coinbase, Gary Gensler, chair of the SEC, will say that is a security. And in many cases, he's right, regardless of anything else anybody has said. And the reason he's right is because in the United States, under the Securities Act of 1933, we regulate transactions, not things. And the things that we regulate in those transactions are called securities. And for 85 years, there was no difference whatsoever and nobody cared. But there is now, because now we have a situation where anything can be a security if it is sold in the right way. This cup, if I sold it to you with the profit that it was going to go, with the promise that it was going to go up in value because I was going to do something with this cup to make it more valuable, and you reasonably expected that to be the case, and I was going to profit and you were going to profit, that cup is now a security under the Howey test. Obviously, it's a cup, and obviously it's got another use case. Well, all the various tokens have other use cases, including an NFT that represents a piece of virtual land or represents a piece of art or, you know, anything else. But if it was sold in a certain way in the United States, it's also a security. Now, as you kind of might guess, there are a bunch of other securities laws. There's the 34 Act, which governs exchanges and brokers. There's the 40 Act, 240 Acts actually. One of them is investment companies, one's investment advisors. And they are all grounded in the idea that a security is a security, when it now is not exactly right. And that is actually one of the core reasons why the law in this space is such a ridiculous mess, and particularly in this country. And I will, I guess, maybe a little bit out of order, but say I've got some level of hope that with the Biden executive order that in effect says we're now looking into it as opposed to just letting the administrative bodies run amok, maybe we'll get some improvement in 18 to 24 months. I really hope so, because otherwise all business will in fact move overseas. Which gets to kind of a more interesting point, or a few more interesting points. And forgive me guys, I'm horrible at digressing and such, but really fast. I want everybody to understand what an NFT actually is, because it's important. It is a little bit of code that sits on a blockchain and executes something and points to something. It's basically media that we can record stuff on, that we can do a lot more stuff with than we can do with the old media. And in thinking about it, my parallel, my metaphor, is it's basically like going from clay tablets to paper. You know, when we shifted from clay to papyrus, that's where we are now. If you think about this, if you go to talk to somebody who's only familiar with clay tablets, and you try to explain to them the concept of a book, you're going to realize that they're going to have a real hard time understanding what a book is and what you can do with a book and why a book is valuable. That is where we are right now. And I'm not going to begin to try to come up with the various use cases that are going to come out of this, because there's no way on earth I possibly could, because I'm used to books. And we're now looking at something entirely different. And, you know, I consider myself blessed that I have a little bit of a peek at what it is that hopefully a lot of other people are going to have pretty quickly. But that's where we are. Okay, so what is an NFT when it is a particular NFT? The answer is really just about anything, and also more things at a time. Put aside what I said about securities. We're going to assume for a second here it was not sold in a transaction that would make it an investment contract. Last Friday, I was in LA and got a call from a friend of mine, client also, telling me that there was a party in downtown LA that, you know, some of the people at one of my clients, a mutual client, were throwing. And it was a warehouse party. It was, you know, 10 a.m. till 6 a.m. type of thing that I'm not really super up for anymore, but there's a client involved. I thought about it. So I went online and I looked at what this party was. And, you know, everything looks great. And then I see that it's actually sponsored by an NFT project. And in order to get into this party, you have to own the NFT. The NFT is going for 1.1 ETH. And the NFT entitles you to be part of this community. It comes with a really cool piece of art. And of course, it's transferable. And this community is supposedly, according to them, going to be throwing parties consistently in multiple locations around the globe for an indefinite amount of time. All right, so what is that? That's about $3,500 to buy a piece of art and go to a party with a promise of other stuff happening. And I'm buying it directly from them, which means if there's any thought that it would go up in value, and to these guys' credit, there was not on this site, nobody was saying this is going up in value, then it also would have been a security. So the clocks are melting all around me at that point, and I have no idea what's going on, other than the fact that I knew I was not going to a warehouse party in downtown LA. Yes?
They're selling an NFT.
Okay?
It's got a piece of art.
Sure.
You're invited to a party.
Yep.
Your very specific, extremely narrow reading is there was no, or at least no implication this will rise in value. In a world where virtually everybody except me and maybe you assumes that all NFTs are going to rise in value.
Oh, yeah.
How do we get around that? Because I got to tell you, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think I'd want to argue that case in front of a lot of judges. So
you and I differ in at least one thing, in that I would love to argue that case in front of a lot of judges.
By the way, you wouldn't want to argue with me as opposing counsel, because I would trot out 5,000 people who have made the same statement and say, how can you just eliminate this?
Do you want to get a chair?
I'd love to.
Because I'll take you up on it.
I'd love to be in front of a jury, because we'd confuse the hell out of them.
Oh, well, see, yes, that different problem entirely, different speech, one I'm much less qualified for, quite honestly. But you know, here's the thing. To briefly digress, the positions that the SEC have taken are hyper-technical, and they are counting roundly on the idea that they're bullies. Nobody wants to get into a fight. But we do have at least one instance where it did go to a jury, just not with the SEC. They settled a matter. They got a consent decree with somebody that a token was a security. There was a civil suit by some of the token purchasers, and the jury came out in the other direction. And the SEC says this has no binding value, which they're correct. It doesn't. But don't be so sure about that. You know what? Well, the SEC was a consent decree. That's not appealable. So yeah, I mean, that was already on the road. And in fairness, I'm not a litigator, and I will play one occasionally up in front of a group of people when I'm taunted, but that's about the extent of it.
So I have a quick question. Like, so,
Yeah.
And look, and by the way, I understand, so we don't need to let go of this. But if we just take traditional art as like I know NFTs can be way more than art.
No, we can go out with it.
Take traditional art as like an example here. Is there no expectation that traditional art will appreciate, right? Like, so it's not a security, right? Because I can buy art today, right? Avoid my capital gains taxes, donate it to a foundation later, thus avoid those capital gains taxes, which becomes basically money laundering, right?
So yeah.
How is that? It's no different than the traditional art world today. Am I wrong? Like,
Yeah, kind of, sort of. Let me explain.
Okay.
All right, so first off, I'm making no statement whatsoever about tax at all, because I'm not a tax attorney either, although I do occasionally play one in certain deals, but with supervision.
By the way, the two do not
we
have
like
to
the
be consistent.
Yeah, no, they don't actually. The tax laws and securities laws. All right, so here's the deal. Everything on this planet is a commodity, including securities. Okay, if you look, at least according to the Commodity Exchange Act, everything on this planet is a commodity. The Commodity Exchange Act, which mandates the CFTC to do its stuff, is a much more forgiving statute than the Securities Acts in total. What it basically says is that if you're using leverage or if you're doing a futures transactions, we are going to regulate you. And if you're doing an exchange for things that are leveraged or futures transactions, we are going to regulate you. And other than that, don't commit fraud. That's the short summary of the Commodity Exchange Act. Now, it defines a commodity, and like I'm saying, yeah, you know, I think it holds short of people because that's against the 13th Amendment, but other than that, everything is a commodity, including securities. However, securities are carved out, and the SEC and the CFTC have kind of a handshake deal, although it's decades old, about who's going to enforce what, because obviously when you get into derivatives of commodities, it turns into securities a lot of the time, and again, beyond the scope of this discussion. So, art. Your art is a commodity. Your piece of art is a commodity, but it's a really illiquid one. It's a one that the CFTC is highly unlikely to even think twice about because it just doesn't fall into the category of being like gold or oil or frozen orange juice. So, you know, that's that piece of it. But it doesn't mean it's unregulated. Now, there's a few different flavors of what's happening in the NFT world. And we're fortunate enough to have clients that are doing a few of them, so I actually can speak to this stuff a little bit. You can have an NFT that represents ownership of a physical piece of art. And when I say represents ownership of a physical piece of art, what I mean is that there's provenance on that art. Somebody has looked at it, verified it, authenticated it. There is a tracking system on that art. Somebody has managed to, in some way, shape, or form, without damaging the art, install an RFID, maybe multiple, but various authentication techniques. There is an NFT that is pointing to storage space someplace. There's an NFT on that butterfly, which is a commodity. It's pointing to storage space someplace that is going to allow you to verify that RFID, probably have a paper version, digitized obviously, of the provenance and of the authentication and everything else that you would need to know that unless there was some seriously sophisticated fraud taking place, that in fact buying that NFT equals buying that piece of art, and you can do that and have it shipped to you, or maybe it's still sitting in the museum, or there's all kinds of reasons why you would want possession of the physical art and the NFT not to be in the same place. Not the least of which is collateralization, actually, which is a UCC thing. Anyways, So that's one flavor. Another flavor, and a more interesting, more difficult flavor, is the idea that you're going to fractionalize ownership of this physical art, and you're going to sell tokens, which quite honestly could be fungible or non-fungible, but we'll stick with non-fungible here, that represent interests in ownership of that art. And now we get to play a lot of games, and it's a lot of fun. So let's say that there are 2,000 owners of the Mona Lisa. Well, they can't all possess it at once. We got that. So how are you dealing with that? They certainly can't all decide to sell it at once, although they may be able to decide to sell their 1/2000th of it at once. There is little chance that the Louvre is actually doing anything to foster the increase in value of the Mona Lisa. They don't have to, but that's great because now there's potentially not common enterprise. So let's take securities law out of it, although in the NFT space, Bored Apes, we'll get to the example of Bored Apes in a while. I can do that for you guys. But a lot of the stuff where it's building the community doesn't survive, art is worthless, probably a security to this gentleman's kind of nod and smile. Even if it's not pitched that way, people are betting on the community to make it worth value. All right, so we tokenize the Mona Lisa. And now let's say that I want to be able to have those 2,000 tokens of the Mona Lisa liquid. I want them to be able to trade because, maybe I'm buying it as a collector, but I want it to trade. Now, how is that going to work if those things are going to be subject to leverage or potentially not instantly delivered? Because now it does fall into the Commodities Exchange Act. And an exchange that handles that type of a token actually needs to be really cognizant of whether they're allowing leverage or whether they're doing things that might be considered to be a swap, which they're probably not, but anyways. Because they could end up walking into regulatory under the Commodities Exchange Act as a commodities, exchange, brokerage house, whatever. You get the idea. Sorry,
So
brain
for a
cramp.
spot market token, then it would be SEC, and if it has leverage
Kind of.
and or futures.
Because this exists today, right? Like I can already buy fractional ownership in art in fiat, and so that's a security though.
No, so that if you're buying fractional art in fiat, it's almost certainly going to be a commodity, although it could be considered a security, but at the end of the day, nobody really cares because there's no way to trade it.
Right, okay, that's what I get to. It's like, okay, there's this perception of like the people, right? Trade what we can reasonably argue in a court of law is like perceived, but we're saying that there's no case law to basically dictate that.
I mentioned the melting clocks around your head from the Salvador Dali painting, right? You actually used the word perceived. Yeah. That's what I mean.
Right.
And when you get right down to it, everybody says the law doesn't keep up with technology. It doesn't. But you could also put it a little bit differently. The law doesn't scale. The law doesn't scale. So if you're asking me a question about what happens IRL, the answer might really be nobody cares. Because, it just hasn't reached the point of relevance.
Right.
But when you can do 10,000 generatives at the drop of a hat, now people care. Now people care because some idiot in a flyover state can take a mortgage out on it and go and buy that, and that is actually what the Securities and Exchange Commission is actually there to prevent, specifically.
The argument would be that like this has always existed. It's just been limited to super high wealth net individuals that have been playing a game.
Yeah.
Now it's just public knowledge becoming.
Well, yeah, but
right? Like the game is the same. Like it's no different than what I was able
sure,
to do.
but here,
I'm not that rich, by the way. I don't have any of this, but like.
I believe you.
This is a game.
Okay, so here's the thing though. You're kind of putting your finger on it a little bit. The SEC private placement rules talk about accredited investors. I mean, there's an angle on this really, which is extremely paternalistic, which says, American public, you can't really do it for yourself, witness the Great Depression, which triggered these rules in the first place. We're going to protect you, and we're going to do it by all these various rules. But by the way, if you're dealing with somebody who can protect themselves, as measured by the fact that they have a certain level of income or wealth, yeah, we don't care anymore. You guys work it out amongst yourselves. And the Jobs Act changed that a bit in a really meaningful way by creating 506C, which basically says it's a private placement, but it doesn't need to be private. You can generally solicit. You can advertise in newspapers if you like, as long as you don't sell it to anybody who's not an accredited investor. And that is, pretty much what every single one of my clients on a private placement relies on now because it's the easiest thing. It's, you don't even really necessarily need to do a PPM. You just need to not commit fraud, which in my advice usually requires something like a PPM, but we'll put that aside. You know, but now you get to a different question, which is, do you want to live in a world where you have to be an accredited investor to buy a collectible or a piece of art?
No, because I could buy jewelry today, right? I could buy rare stones.
Yes, but if it was an NFT, it might be a security,
Right. But
or a
that's
commodity.
ridiculous, right? Like, 'cause that's the same way I can avoid those.
Right.
Same, like,
So, yeah, by the way, tax avoidance is
nobody's
bad.
gonna argue that diamond is
I'm gonna, this is not legal advice, but start getting used to the words tax optimization.
Okay.
Tax avoidance is okay, tax evasion is.
Evasion is not good.
So can you go back to the distinction, art, not a security? Is that principally because few enough units of ownership were sold that no market develops? I'm remembering my mother going nuts when the Celtics went public. She was born in Salem, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And she was so delighted when Dad bought her 400 shares of the Celtics. She even got the security
Yep.
certificate, framed it. Now, there was never an expectation of dividends. You had no say in who was going to be in the starting
Yep.
lineup.
Yep.
You couldn't talk to them about who was going in the draft.
Yep.
Green Bay just did this with NFTs.
Oh no, well Green Bay did was stock first.
Those were actually LPs.
Yeah, those were the first.
So,
Yeah.
so is the distinction really just that there aren't enough pieces out there that anyone ever develops any kind of market?
No, I mean that's why nobody cares, because there's not enough pieces. I mean, you know, the Celtics and the Great, all this stuff, those aren't securities because there's no financial value to them, and they're not close the line. But they couldn't go after everybody, so they, you know, they made their choices. I'm sure there's a long list of folks they would love to have gone after, but they couldn't do it.
So they went after Ripple because it was high profile?
They went after Ripple because they're bad guys. And I'm on video, and I will go on video as saying that, because whether they committed securities fraud or not, what they did with the announcements with Western Union was fraud on the quote market, and they ought to go to jail. And I feel very strongly about that because I think they created a bad view over the entire industry. So there you have it. There's your soundbite, Brad. Hey,
Let's
to see
bring
you.
it back to Josh. Let's bring it back to the metaverse.
I
So,
will talk about anything, by the way. So on the metaverse front.
how do we do things in a regulated way?
Yeah,
in
so
the metaverse?
here's the first
From
thing.
inception
Yeah.
to a living
Okay.
ecosystem.
Okay, so the first thing to recognize is that absent terms and conditions, there is no law specific to the metaverse. And that's a really big deal. Now, if you go and look at Sandbox, you're going to find them formed out of Hong Kong, and Animoca is kind of very much in the forefront as being, you know, a party that's there. If you go and look at Decentraland, and you spend a lot of time doing it, you're going to find that there's somewhere an entity out of Panama. And it's really hard to find even that, let alone who's in charge of it. And if you look at the Decentraland terms and conditions, what you're going to see is that they're spectacularly fluffy. And actually, sandboxes aren't really that much less fluffy. What they don't have a securities regime, they don't have a commodities regime, there is no Lanham Act on trademark, there is no Copyright Act, there are certainly no UCC areas, there is pretty much nothing. So what you're left with in that is that if you enter into a quote smart contract in the metaverse, you really only have whatever enforcement that little bit of code points to if you don't know who you're entering into the contract with. And there's a concept called a Ricardian contract. I don't know if you guys know what that is. Ricardian contract, which apparently was named after somebody whose last name was Ricardo, not kidding. And that basically is the combination of the two. That's where you've got, you know, a smart contract operating on code that's executing with a contract in some language that's enforceable in some court somewhere. And I think that that's where we're going to answer your question, Brad, is, you know, yes, it's possible that we could live in a metaverse that actually has all the various statutory schemes laid out, has, you know, figured out how to enforce in a way that conceivably might only be enforcement within that metaverse, but is painful enough to act as deterrence and compensation. Certainly possible. I hope it happens. I mean, there's some people would argue we live in a simulation now, and that's what it is. But more likely, it's going to be a question of, okay, well, is the person in the metaverse that I'm contracting with actually in the United States and subject to US law, or, you know, where are they and what law, and choice of law becomes really, really important, as does understanding jurisdiction. Because, you know, you don't know where the servers necessarily are in most cases. They're spread out. Oh, thank you so much, Lisa.
You're welcome.
That cup's worth more money now. Don't throw it away.
I know.
Yeah. I unfortunately, regretfully, did not mint the NFT, but if I had done so, it would have been on OpenSea because it's not
So
regulated.
if someone were to want to get involved with a metaverse or
Yep.
start one,
Yep.
even more complicated,
Yep.
what would be your recommendations as the legal framework stands now? What to look for or what to preempt as far as any complications you see at the metaverse level? Then we'll go narrow it down to NFT.
Okay, so recognizing that that was probably like a 12-volume treatise of a question that you just asked, that you know, two-part question. Thank you for that. You know, I can only approach it the way I kind of approach everything in the space. The first place to start is not the law. The first place to start is the business. What's the value proposition? Why does this exist in the first place? And we can talk a little bit about DAOs because it's going to be really relevant. And I think a lot of metaverses are going to at least attempt to be governed by DAOs, which is actually, if you're using the word DAO correctly, a worthwhile goal. But you look at the business case and figure out what it is. Because if the metaverse is, uh-oh, I'm being called. Time's happening.
No, please continue.
Okay. But you asked the question. We'll talk later. We'll catch the video. If if the metaverse is about retail, then you really better make sure somehow it's tied into somebody's trademark law and somebody's copyright law and somebody's potentially UCC law. We deal with a lot of clients that are, retail is a spectacular use case for the metaverse. I mean, be able to see it from anywhere and order it and have it shipped or delivered is awesome. And there's some technology that's in the expo hall right there that can do a three-dimensional volumetric representation off of really basic hardware. And you can actually walk around as yourself really in the metaverse and try on clothing. Like, holy crap, guys. I mean, this is like amazing stuff. But you need to have a tie-in to all the law wherever that stuff is going to be delivered is my humble opinion. It's the delivery at that point that really matters, because that's where the real world law can intercede. And if you
To the wallet or to the end user?
no, to the end user. We're talking hardcore products, end user, not digital assets at all. But that's kind of my point about what's the business purpose, because your question demonstrates the point. Different set of law I'm focused on if it's about delivery to a wallet. Totally different set of law. So that's kind of the 5-minute cop-out answer to the question is I'm a lawyer, it depends.
So we can see a broker-dealer.
So I am not going to come to any legal conclusions, especially on things that I haven't studied. However, I will say that if I were OpenSea, I'd be concerned about regulatory oversight. And I'm certainly not going to invest in OpenSea personally, just my own personal.
Just a marketplace, a platform where people transact, or
So, all right.
it depends on whether they're taking agency position or underwriting.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're underwriting anything. And I don't think that they're taking ownership over anything. The real question would be whether they're an ATS, alternative trading system, under regulation ATS, because if you are an ATS, by definition, you have to be a broker-dealer, whether you're doing kind of micro on the art or not. And this is actually the big question on the liquidity pool model of the DeFi exchanges, because it's all peer-to-peer exchange. So how did the SEC get their fingernails under that? And I don't think they figured it out yet, though I don't know that for sure, obviously. But getting back to kind of OpenSea and regulation, this is the law according to Josh, and I will state that right out in the open. There is no guidance. If somebody from the SEC were sitting here next to me, they would cry bullshit. But it's true that the definitions of security in the 33 Act, which regulates issuance, and the 34 Act, which handles secondary transactions, brokers, dealers, exchanges, looks like the same definition, but they both use the words investment contract as their catch-all. To my knowledge, the words investment contract in the 34 Act have never been interpreted by a court. Now, the SEC has jumped on it, and in fact, in the Dow report in 2017 was using the 34 Act as kind of their bastion, but they were just going on the assumption that security means the same thing in both acts because common sense would tell you that it does. The problem with that is that the definition of investment contract, our four-factor Howey test, is the only place in all of securities law I'm aware of that has a subjective component. What was the purchaser thinking at the time of that purchase from the issuer? Was it reasonable? Blah, blah, blah. Well, that's the initial transaction, and that makes a lot of sense in the 33 Act, but there is no initial transaction in the 34 Act. Issuer's long gone. So now what is an investment contract? I don't know. So what does that do to OpenSea? I don't know.
What about an NFT or a security which is not considered a security in the same region it was initially offered?
Yep.
For example, Gibraltar.
Yep.
And after some time it rolls down to the hands
Yep.
of someone in the US.
Yes. Okay. So
Didn't we talk about this a little bit ago?
a little bit. Were you here for the first half of the lecture? Yeah.
Were you here?
I didn't really touch on it fully, though. I can answer the
No, that's
question.
fine. I
Yeah.
didn't mean it like that. I was just
Yeah.
curious.
No, that's fine. So, all right. So here's the thing. If you have a token that is not issued by an issuer in the United States, not issued to a purchaser outside of the United States, and when I say that, I mean the purchaser, unlike Telegram, as the court found at least, is not sitting there thinking we're going to resell it into the United States. So the intent is completely outside the United States, then it is not under jurisdiction of the United States securities laws at that time for that initial issuance. Therefore, under the 33 Act, it's not that it's not a security, it's that it isn't tagged as being a security because it wasn't issued in a regulated transaction. So it's a token. I'm going to assume for a second it's not a financial product because that changes stuff. So now somebody outside the United States logs onto their Coinbase account, sells it through Coinbase to somebody inside the United States, which I'm sure happens all the time. Okay. Question is, was it a security for Coinbase's purposes, very much the way I just kind of ran over OpenSea? I think the SEC would have a hard time saying that it was. Because you don't have an issuer transaction where there is an intent to sell into the United States. Is there guidance on that? No. Is there case law on that? No. Hence why our situation is kind of as bad as it is. And I think that the SEC is terrified. Well, can't imply. If I were the SEC, I would be afraid of issuing guidance because it would be a slippery slope. And then everybody would be chasing the how close to the line can I get. And you have to remember that their mandate, which is a good thing to have it, is protect the Main Street investor, preserve orderly markets. So giving that guidance would not protect the Main Street investor. Notably, the words fostering innovation are not part of the SEC's mandate. And getting back to the Biden executive order, the word innovation is in the Biden executive order, which is why I'm at least a little bit hopeful that we're going to come out with something that makes a little bit more sense.
So how do we differentiate whether a token is a currency
Yeah.
or security? What would be the metrics under the law?
Yeah.
It's complicated.
Forgive me for saying this, but you should hire a really good attorney who knows this stuff well. Pointing to the cameras. That's you. That's you.
I think
Pass
we
the
picked,
business cards up, Sarah.
we, we picked Josh's brain enough. Thank you, Josh.
Very welcome. Always a pleasure, Brad.
Thank you so
Thank you for inviting me,
much.
man.
Yes, please.
All right, so thanks for inviting me. Well, my name is Carmelo Milian. I've been in the technology industry for a long time. I would say probably 30 years. 30 years in technology industry. My background, I was an operations consultant for Microsoft for 13 years. After that, I started my own consulting business, and after that, I started, working with cryptocurrency and helping other projects until I did my own. So how did I came with the idea of Polka City? It was because, first of all, I want to say that, the metaverse has been around for a long time. We just, Facebook made it fashionable with calling themselves Meta, and everybody just suddenly started saying, oh, we are a metaverse. Oh, we're going to build a metaverse and all that
Second
stuff.
Life was the first
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Persistent with
Exactly.
economic value trade.
Exactly. And then so the mayor's being around. So you can argue that like Roblox is the metaverse, right? And my kid was like asking me, you know, if you want to get your kids to do their own laundry at the age of 9, give them some Robux.
Yes, Robux.
Tell them, you wash your laundry, I'm gonna give you a couple of Robux. They're gonna clean, they're gonna get dirty just to clean their laundry. So my kid was always asking me for Robux to buy stuff, and at first I was giving him until the point came where like, wait a minute, you know, hold on, that's not coming back. And I told my son, what you doing with that? He goes like, I'm buying these cars and I'm buying these things. And I said, well, can you sell them? Can you sell them back? And he said, no, you can't, you know. So I was like, oh, so that's not a good deal. So that's why I came with the mentality. So like, how about if I did my own Robux thing, but where everything inside of it was an NFT, and so the people can resell it, you know, and have a market to do this. And I said, how about if I do it with real graphics, not that crappy bit graphics that I don't like. You know, I said, bit graphics were for those days.
Yes.
We are 2022. Come on, you know, let's push the envelope. So then I started thinking, and it all developed in Polka City, which is a kind of like a GTA style game and graphics, but without the violence. We don't want violence, and you know, we want to keep things nice.
GTA is Grand Theft Auto.
Grand Theft Auto. So how about if we do this with our own economy? So we went ahead and we did Polk, which is our token, and everything that you see in the game, the cars, the motorcycles, the buildings, everything is an NFT. So people are buying it and they're making money and selling it and so on. So that's how I came with the idea of the metaverse. So then after that, I mean, working with different partners, and my thoughts have evolved from what I thought was the metaverse a year ago for what it is today. So first of all, a metaverse is none of what those people that say we have a metaverse, those are not metaverses. Those are 3D games, and those are environments where people are around. Like Half-Life was the closest that I remember that can be a metaverse, right? But they have their own monetary database and all this, and I remember you can even buy them in eBay, yes, in all these things. So it make it all complex. But now with what we have, with the technology that we have with the NFTs and the wallets moving around so fast and all that, it's easier to actually build an economy inside the metaverse. So for me to own the right to call Polka City a metaverse, it needs to be not centralized. It needs to be decentralized. We are actually centralized right now. We're decentralizing as we speak. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to be in GitHub. People are going to be able to add and develop for Polka City, do their own things and add them to the metaverse. We check that it's complying with what we're doing, and we commit, and then you can have your own things in the metaverse too. That's one thing. The other one is we need to be able to interconnect other universes. If it's just you're just Facebook. You just get all these other games. So it needs to be Polka City's here, and when you walk through this door, you're in Sandbox. You open to this door, you're in X other metaverses. It should be all interconnected, so that we can from one place jump to another. And that's what we're doing. Polka City is full of partners that and I believe in partners. I mean, partners to me is what it's going to make us grow exponentially, bring expertise. My goal is to build our own economy, right? And all metaverse with our economy, but I mean, I can only get it started, and that's why we do partnerships like with EQIFi, because I mean, they bring the banking, right? So EQIFi is going to be inside Polka City. Is they going to be able to blur that reality that we have here again with the metaverse, right? So you're making all this money in the metaverse. How are you going to spend it? How are you going to spend it? You can spend it in the game really easy, but how are you going to spend it outside? EQIFi debit cards and so on, right? Also, in our metaverse, we're trying to make sure that you forget if you're there or here. So how are we doing that? We have other partners like Hive. They're going to have an employment agency inside Polka City. So you're going to be able to actually go to Polka City and get a job in the metaverse. And who's going to hire him? That's going to be people that are going to have employment to offer in the metaverse. Employments like marketing, If EQIFi has a bank over there, he might have a teller and have somebody, a bot, have somebody there reading people and talking to people in the metaverse and making business. We have blockchain PR who's actually has a whole island with a huge building, and they're doing so many things over there I cannot keep track. They're gonna be launching projects. They're gonna be launching NFTs inside the metaverse, and they're gonna be doing a whole bunch of things. So I mean, imagination is that's the thing about the metaverse. You can do whatever you want.
So talk a little bit about interoperability and kind of persistent identity across platforms.
Oh, wow, what a question. I mean, I'm not paying him, I swear. I'm not paying him.
We'll talk later also.
Yeah, I'm not paying him. So yes, that's another thing. I'm talking about metaverses interacting with each other, being able to interconnect. We need an identity that can go cross-platform, across different metaverses. So Facebook has the guy up to here, and then we have the whole avatar, and then all these the 8-bit characters and all that. So that's the thing. We need to unify this. So what I'm thinking is, and I'm building kind of like a consortium. I'm not sure if that's the right word, but a group of people from different metaverses so that we can work together and do an identity management for the metaverse, where your avatar is your avatar. It cannot be replicated. Everybody knows that that's your identity, kind of, verified. And I know that some people don't want to get verified, but this is for the people who want to, the people who care about their identity. They can do this, and they're going to be able to go across different metaverses with their own avatar, and when they move, they're also bringing all their financials, and everything is secured. So that's part of my plans for that interoperability.
What's the motivation of 5 different companies when they have their own economy in the metaverse to join? Because in the, let's say, real world, we had the same issue with the gaming companies. Like, we build a different layer on top of them in order to be able to connect them, because they have no interest to hurt their own economies.
Yeah, you know what? I'm a true believer. I don't have any competitors. Decentraland or the other one, I don't believe they're competitors. They're just really good potential partners. And the way to do this, I mean, is community. I want to build a community. The metaverse community needs to be one. So if we bring all these people, I'm not thinking about, if I bring Decentraland, I'm not thinking about what they're going to give me. I'm not thinking, I hope that they're probably going to be like, what are you going to bring me? If they have that mentality, they're going to miss the boat, because eventually it's going to be one metaverse. And they need to interconnect.
So all the assets, I have assets on your metaverse, I can take them elsewhere.
That's exactly, you should be able to. If you have a car in my game, you should be able to drive that car in other metaverses.
Is this an idea, or are you executing that technically speaking?
No, we're doing this as we speak. We're in beta.
Across which chains?
Binance chain and Ethereum chain. We're going to go next to Polygon.
Binance, Ethereum,
Yeah.
But those are all the same contracts, so that technology,
Yes.
that's actually not interoperable.
Yes,
it's the same technical.
well, it's the same technology, but different chains. And we're going to keep adding, and our goal is for every chain that has NFT contracts, we want to integrate. It has to, that's our thing. I mean, these are the low-hanging fruits, like you said, Binance, Polygon. Those are the low-hanging fruits, right? But once we have those, we're gonna start getting all the harder ones in.
I was just really interested in the technical solution to doing.
Oh,
that,
it's all bridge. It's the same thing.
Idea of doing, like, the idea has been around for.
It's the same
decades.
thing.
We've been talking about this.
It's the same thing. It's the same thing when you're talking about different chains. What are you doing? You're doing a contract here with a dApp that is going to execute something in the other chain. So it will be the same thing. All you need is to have is the dApp, which is the bridge, the middleman, who's going to orchestrate. So the technology aspect is
you need the control systems, like that's
you need
like exchanging currency today. Like,
exactly.
Right? And I would argue, not to shout at things, but to say that things aren't competitors to me is way off. That's like saying that Miami and Fort Lauderdale aren't competitors, or Ohio and New York aren't competitors, or let alone the U.S. and Russia.
Well,
all these things in the metaverse are places, and where people choose to live
is
going to be the most valuable. valuable thing.
So this is the thing. This is the thing. And I will argue against that because what I believe is, if we are having just metaverses that are not interconnected, you just have a 3D website. You just have a website where everybody is connecting. So to remember when remember
Places with the lack of a travel system in between.
remember 20, 30 years ago when everybody had their own server and they will browse to an IP address to connect to this place. Before Google and all of that, right? It was that world. Remember, that was the fraction. When Google came out, it mixed everything. So Google is orchestrating everything. Google is putting everything together.
Way before Google, Internet Explorer was way before Google. Like,
Yeah.
Google built a new algorithm to sort.
Yeah,
data,
and it makes their life easier. If it wasn't for Google, my mom and my dad would not be in the internet. They'll probably be connecting to the bank only. Only to the bank.
I wanna touch on Ophir's question and then a little bit yours. So why should metaverses work together instead of competing? Is without economic value flow between, they're isolated.
Oh, by the way, I want to clarify. I'm not arguing that they shouldn't work
Oh,
together.
no.
I'm saying that they are competitors.
Yeah,
No, they are, but it's like you're saying Fort Lauderdale is competing with Miami. They're still
for tour
connected.
shells.
There's
For dollars.
several freeways and railways and everything between them because that economic value they compete for flows and creates growth on both sides. It's the same thing. By connecting different environments and games and things, you can show that you're going to generate more value than having the walled garden approach where your users can't take anything in or out, their users can't take anything in or out, so they have to choose. Then the user loses because they have to choose. You lose because if they don't choose you, you lost that opportunity. Whereas if it's interconnected, they may go here, they may transfer some value, but then there's other people from here who are gonna come, like people from LA move to Miami all the time and they take all the value they created in LA and bring it here, and vice versa. People from Miami move to Puerto Rico. But it's always good to be able to do that versus people in Russia right now that can't take any of the value anywhere because they're locked out. Both their government and international community said you can't transfer any value. So in that case, everyone's losing. I mean, whether you like it or not, we're losing right now because that economic value is cut off. They're losing because they don't get the goods and services created by U.S. companies. And instead of both proliferating, it's just cut off. So that would be the reason why you would want to connect them, and hopefully they see that too.
I'm going to give you an example. When the buzz came out, metaverse, everybody ran and do their own metaverse. And then I know a bank. I was talking to somebody the other day. So they gave him the bank. He needs to be in the metaverse, one of these real banks. And I goes, okay. So what did they do? They hired a bunch of developers and started building a metaverse. I'm like, that's not the way to go. The way to go is, you know what? That bank, go to the center, go to Polka City, go here. Don't be building your own metaverse. Join a metaverse and integrate. Make. So that's because. We're gonna be able to leverage everybody's community until we just one community.
But I see that like the metaverse is just the internet, right? So like banking, banking companies, like when the .com era boosted, like they had to digitalize or get on the web, like become an internet company, right? And arguably a lot of them built technologies that really were revolutionary. That if they would have just used WordPress or whatever we're trying to force in here, you would lose all this innovation. Now, I'm not saying that certain companies are the best.
It's the next step. Is definitely.
I dealt with this for a long time.
Definitely, it's the next step. First we had the magazines, newspapers, right, and then we have TV, radio, and then we have the internet, and now we have the metaverse.
Tablets.
It's giving you.
went too fast. Start where Josh started.
I'll start at clay
Tablets.
tablets. I'll start at clay tablets. I'll take you from clay tablets all the way to 3D photographs.
Exactly.
For sure.
Exactly. So so it's the evolution, and like I said, the metaverse has been around a long time, but it now has the biggest wave of where we're heading, and now is the time to get there. We can do things that we couldn't do in the website. You can be And by the way, Pocket City is download for PC and Mac, but by the end of the year, we're going to be VR also.
Are you web responsive? Are you like native apps or web responsive?
We're web responsive. We actually need to improve our mobile. Actually, we're getting help from our friends here, revamping